It's not a secret that car manufacturing is a volatile and ever-changing business. The world of the automobile is constantly evolving with the times, and technology improves at a rapid rate. While most brands are able to keep up with this change, sometimes there are those who simply aren't able to stay in the loop, and this is where they end up, the graveyard. It's not necessarily that these brands made bad cars, in many cases they made great cars. Sometimes it's just that Lady Luck isn't on their side. Here are their stories. Saab is likely one of the biggest and most memorable dead car brands. They were once the main and, let's face it, only manufacturers to come out of Sweden opposite Volvo. However, despite Volvo still doing well to this day, Saab met its end quite recently in 2012. But why? Well, it was a messy end. Saab had been acquired by American brand General Motors in 2000, but GM had been purchasing shares in the Swedish company as early as the late 1980s, with shares totaling over $600 million. When Saab was fully acquired by GM as the new millennium began, their range of cars began to shift, now showcasing sedans much more as an example. This change seemed to be quite good initially, as Saab was doing rather well in the early and mid-2000s. However, a slowing economy in 2007, which as we all know ended with the market crash of 2008, slowed sales across all of GM's platforms. Saab was particularly hard hit. GM placed Saab under review in December of that year, and Saab soon went into administration, also known as Chapter 11 bankruptcy. General Motors, despite being the biggest car manufacturer in the world, could no longer afford to run the failing brand. They needed a buyer. There were talks of Saab being sold to another Swedish brand, Koenigsegg, but that ended up falling through when funds could not be secured. Spyker, a Dutch sports car manufacturer, came through as a surprising bidder, and GM eventually agreed to the acquisition. GM would continue to supply engines and transmissions to Saab, as well as fully completed Saab 94Xs from their Mexican factory. While this deal had seemed to come through at just the right time, this too fell through. Saab had officially run out of funds, and Spyker simply wasn't able to resupply the money pot. Deliveries were cut off to Saab's main factory in Sweden, and production too was soon halted indefinitely. Multiple joint ventures were announced between Saab and multiple Chinese companies in order to regain losses, but these efforts all proved futile. In early 2012, Saab was forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and left behind a debt totaling over $1.5 billion. In the following year, Spyker filed a lawsuit against GM for $3 billion in damages, claiming that GM had undertaken many efforts to block the proposed deals between Saab and Chinese company Youngman, who were willing to invest billions of dollars to keep Saab in the green, while also requiring Saab to cease using GM technologies in their cars. The case was soon dismissed, but that didn't fill the hole that the Saab brand had left behind after over 3 years of treading water to avoid bankruptcy. Truly a sad end to a great manufacturer. General Motors may have destroyed Saab, but it certainly isn't the only brand that they've put an end to, as we shall later see. Rover is another pretty big one, and was once one of the leading manufacturers in the United Kingdom, so how could it all go so wrong? Well, Rover's end is part of a massive restructuring of many companies that was undertaken in the early 2000s. Rover, along with other brands like Mini, Land Rover, Austin and others, were all owned by BMW in the 1990s. However, due to fluctuating, though on the whole declining market share, BMW decided to split up these brands. They retained the Mini brand, sold Land Rover to the Ford Motor Company, and all others, including MG, were sold to something called the Phoenix Consortium. This company re-established these brands as the new and creatively named MG Rover Group. BMW still retained ownership of Rover, but licensed out the brand name to MG Rover to continue building models. Confused yet? Because I know I am. However, the figures were not good. 1999 saw the Rover Group sustain losses of over £800 million, and that is quite a lot to say the least. Despite launching new models after the creation of MG Rover, such as the 75 and the City Rover, sales were either slow or, in the case of the City Rover, were massively panned critically at release, further slowing the potential profits MG Rover could be pulling in. On the 15th of April 2005, MG Rover was declared insolvent, where the company was unable to pay debts and had to cease operations. MG Rover never finished a year without reporting losses. The physical assets were purchased later that year by Chinese brand Nanjing Automobile, who had plans to restart production on previous models in the UK's Longbridge plant. However, it took so long to get off the ground, it never really happened as intended. MG later did re-emerge, with the MG6 launching in 2007 as their first model since 2005, but Rover never resurfaced. Part of the deal between BMW and Ford when Land Rover was acquired by Ford was also that Ford would gain the rights to the Rover name should MG Rover stop trading, which it did. In mid-2006, the rights to the Rover name were transferred to Land Rover, which was still owned by Ford. The last major step in Rover's slow death was in 2008, when Ford sold its Jaguar and Land Rover brands, which was later combined into Jaguar Land Rover, to Indian company Tata Automotive, along with the rights to the Rover name. Still, Tata never resurrected the Rover brand, leaving Rover itself in the ground for 16 years at this point. MG, on the other hand, is doing fairly well, with a range of models including the MG3, the MG5, the MG6 and the MG V80. Rover is all but rotting in the ground at this point. Now those two were some pretty large European brands that went under, but let's face it, there's no country in the world better at shutting down their car companies than the United States of America. There have just been so many over the years, and the big daddy of them all is General Motors. Sure, there's the likes of Plymouth, AMC, Studebaker, DeLorean and so many more, maybe a part 2 is in order, but GM is just the master, no two ways about it. Despite being one of the biggest automobile manufacturers in the world, sheltering countless smaller brands under their large blue umbrella, they haven't really been good at keeping them out of the rain. The rain in this case being a metaphor for bankruptcy. Oldsmobile was one of their biggest in recent times. They had an amazing period of profit in the 1970s and 80s, but the 1990s started a downfall the brand would not be able to get out of, with sales dropping from over 1 million in 1985 to just 400,000 by 1993. By 2000, GM knew there was no saving the failing icon. Starting in June of 2002, GM began phasing out Oldsmobile models one by one, starting with the intriguing Aura V8, and the final Oldsmobile model, the Alero, ended production in April of 2004. Once a revolutionary brand with so many firsts in the industry, snapped out of existence with no trace left behind. But this was just the start for GM. The financial crisis of 2008, which led to GM's filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and subsequent restructuring in 2009, led to them having to sell off or completely shut down many branches and brands of their company, as they wanted to focus on their 4 core brands, these being Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac and GMC. This was all in order to secure a $25 billion loan from US Congress to aid the restructuring. One such unlucky brand was Saturn. It was launched in 1985 to compete with new autos coming over from Japan, and for most of its lifespan actually sold unique and on the whole snazzy looking cars to the general public of the US. When GM was forced to restructure, they looked for a potential buyer to continue the Saturn lineage. One was actually found, the Penske Automotive Group. They wouldn't actually manufacture the cars, only own the brand. They would have to find another auto builder to do the actual construction, and they got in talks with the Renault-Nissan alliance over the viability of this. However, when Penske couldn't find a suitable manufacturer, the deal between GM and Penske quickly fell through by September of 2009, and Saturn closed its doors for good. Pontiac was in a similar boat. Initially, GM planned to retain the Pontiac brand, though slimming down the model range to just 4, as well as focusing solely on the quote-unquote youthful and sporty market. However, the previous number of 4 models was later dropped to just 1. At this point, was there any point in keeping the Pontiac brand alive if they're only going to produce 1 model? Well, it seemed that GM shared this outlook, as in April of 2009, GM announced its elimination of the Pontiac brand, with all autos phased out by 2010. Hummer met the same fate. Being that the brand produced only big, thirsty, heavy SUVs, the landscape of 2008 with rocketing oil prices might not be the best suit, and therefore was put under review like its brethren, though GM was adamant that they were going to be able to find a buyer to keep the brand alive. And they did manage to find one, the Sichuan Tengzong Heavy Industrial Machine Company, or STHRIMP for short. It looked promising for a while, but while SIMPC were waiting for approval by the Chinese government, this deal too ended up falling through, and GM announced that Hummer would be shutting down, and the final Hummer H3 rolled off the production line in May of 2010. However, unlike most of these dead brands, Hummer has actually made a comeback. Somewhat. The name has returned, yes, but only as one specific model, the GMC Hummer EV. Maybe a disappointment to all, 3 Hummer fanboys out there, but hey, it's better than nothing. Obviously, these brands I've just looked into aren't the only automobile bankruptcies in history. There are countless others. Again, perhaps a part 2 is in order, despite the fact that it's a hit or miss on whether I make them or not. Hit like if you'd like to see it, and tell me your favourite, or should it be least favourite, dead car brands, and how sad it's made you to know that they are now dead. Thank you so much for watching, with a very special thanks to Ben Wright and Bryn Palmer, who are very generously donating at the highest tier on my Patreon. Just £1 a month is an amazing help, and I also have a Discord server and an Instagram page, links in the description below. Again, thank you for watching, and take care.